Okay, hi, it's Tuesday, 26th of October. This is Mass Media and Culture lecture number 7. Working on culture, film and commodity today. Mostly going to talk about precursors to film, I suppose. How the structure of contemporary film is influenced by what happened well before in the world of theatre, acting, well, opera, actually. And the work of Richard Wagner and Adorno's critique of Wagner. So we'll just get straight into it. Of course, it follows on from what we were talking about in previous weeks. We've been looking at mass media and its different forms, newspapers, photography, radio, and today the plans to examine film. But the pieces of film I want to show you necessarily make it necessary. We have to refer to more than film theory. This has been the way in which we've been doing this for this course, right? It's been our theme in a way, a motif, if you like, that a theory of the media cannot confine itself only to media theory. And so in the case of film, the story of film can't confine itself to can't rely only on film theory, although there's a lot of film theory that we should absorb in order to explain its work. All right, so this is the Oscar Necht point that we went into detail on a few weeks back now. The question for consideration today, besides these little quotes that I got, did Wagner from Zizek, Slavoj Zizek, the Elvis of cultural theory, as they say, what a standardization that is, as you'll see. He's a commodity. Did Wagner really accomplish the first step towards the kitschy fetishization of music that reaches its apogee in classical Hollywood? That's Zizek kind of twisting, channeling Adorno's point, even though mostly he ignores that point, as we'll see. Previously, the quote was from Nietzsche. Is Wagner a human being at all? Or is he another disease? He contaminates everything he touches. He's made music sick. Wagner himself, music is the inarticulate speech of the heart, which cannot be expressed in words because it's infinite. Oh. Anyway, where are we? We live in an audio-visual environment. That's the first thing I want to think of today. Often we're overly focused on analyzing the visual, on representation, and forgetting the audio side that invokes interpretation through tone, mood. Tone is like the atmosphere created by sounds. Usually it refers to an instrument, but we can think of it in a wider sense. The tone or the mood, the feeling one gets from the music that's there at the same time in the audio visual. But often we forget this though, and you know, it's such a common thing in our lives. We have every day, in fact, we feel the need to have a soundtrack. You know, whether it be at a sporting event, an audio that we add to a video of some event in our lives, like a wedding ceremony or something we record. It doesn't sound right until it's got some music behind it. Or our chosen entertainment might be just to listen to a music video or film with a soundtrack, right? And then all day, every day, advertisements that we watch on television or we see on a screen in a lift or as we're walking past a store or in the mall or car radio, bus, television. Televisions on buses used to drive me crazy. Now it's standard, et cetera, et cetera. The screen is everywhere and the audio is always there in the background, so to speak. Even if you're not looking at the screen, it's surrounding us in our world. I mean, sometimes it's noise. It can be real noise pollution, which also is just a background hum. But it also is little jingles and bits of music here and there. We're going to think about their significance because each one of them is composed and recorded and prepared and played as a commodity. Sold, I suppose, bought, sold, and put on in order to grab your attention, affect your mood, spin you in encourage you to interpret things in a certain way. Fill in the total surround of the audiovisual media, in which we now live, basically. Our screen is filled, both audio and visual. And this is what we might explore today, the standardization of this culture that fills our entire screen and the entire space of the film auditorium, which is our mise en scène, the pro-filmic event before our eyes, if you like, and that this was in preparation long before there was film. That this was, from before there was film, spilling out beyond the film into wider culture, there was always this tendency towards commodification for hundreds of years, actually. And film's not only on film, right? It's in our lives, in the street, in the stores, almost everywhere there are film references now. It's hard to imagine a time when we weren't in total film. That Scott McGuire once asked, there was believed there was once a time when television didn't exist. Now it so saturates our environment. And the filmic, the pro-filmic, might be argued, was already prepared in culture before film. This happened especially, or most comprehensively perhaps, in theatre and opera, perhaps also operettas. If you want to see Siegfried Krakau's great work, Orpheus in Paris, on the operettas of 19th century Paris. Adorno didn't like the book, but he was Adorno's mentor in a way, and he wrote this book just soon before Adorno wrote his own book on Wagner. And it's particularly the work on Wagner by Adorno that I want to look at, because Adorno's argument about Wagner does suggest that the fetishization of culture was first or most comprehensively achieved by Wagner at Beirut, in the town of Beirut, where the Wagner ring cycle was performed in a special Schauspielhaus, a theatre, and a whole, basically a town built in order to set up the atmosphere of the ring cycle. Wagner, Richard Wagner. So Adorno is in the 70s was considered the best book on Wagner, perhaps by some anyway, and it does give us ways to, I think, good example of how to study the political, social class, race, gendered context of cultural production by looking at Wagner. And here he is. Look at his. Definitely a thespian, right? But he was an interesting guy. Richard Wagner is born May 22, 1813. So to place him 5 years before Marx, by almost exactly. And he died in February 13th, 1883, about a month before Marx died. So they're in a way contemporaries, which is interesting. And they even, in a way, live a similarly structured life. They do some initial work and then get involved in the 1848 revolution. I mean, obviously, Marx and Engels write the Communist Manifesto, whereas Wagner writes Lohengrin. Still important work, but not with the same impact. But when Marx is in Cologne writing in the Rheinische Zeitung, and Engels is off writing in the battles, and Marx is caught up in the court, Wagner is on the barricades in Dresden with Bakunin, Michael Bakunin, the anarchist figure who he's close to. Of course, this revolution is defeated, as we know from reading Marx's 18th Brumaire, and that's history. Wagner flees to Switzerland and then is involved the next 30 years in writing this epic ring cycle. It's not parallel exactly to writing Capital, and he finishes it for starters, but it's epic, big, and he lives kind of as on handouts, especially from Franz Liszt, who gives him a house to live in, which is kind of handy. And his daughter, although Liszt didn't like that so much, his daughter Cosima was already married to someone else, and well, so was Wagner, for that matter. He meets Nietzsche. Nietzsche's often a house guest. And a big fan until he's not, when he turns out to be very hostile, as we saw from the earlier quote. But by the late 60s, early 70s, the mid-70s, he's made the acquaintance of Ludwig II, the Bavarian ruler, who basically bankrolls him to build the festival house for the ring, which he locates not in Munich, where Ludwig II wanted it, but in nearby-ish, in Beirut, more like near Nuremberg, but nonetheless. The ring cycle. What is the ring cycle? So it's a story. It's an epic, massively epic. Not like you and I, which would, if we ever went to the opera, we would go for one evening, very rarely, and for a couple of hours, right? This was 4 days. You went to the town. It was a big trip. You sat in the auditorium for many hours and watched this 4 days worth of opera with fantastic music and setting and staging and really to be seen, to be believed from the photographic evidence. But it's impossible to even summarize, right? This is a festival, a 4-day festival, so much is going on, and it's a total surround event with all the things that happen in festivals and dining, and there are hotels catering for it, and so on. And the story itself, the ring cycle, it's impossible to reduce well, it's a quest. It might seem a bit familiar for anyone who knows the Lord of the Rings or the Matrix, or many. There's this dwarf figure called Alberic, and he steals the gold from the nymphs, who are Rhine maidens. They live in the Rhine, and they look after this gold. This gold has got a special power. It can be made into a ring with huge power if the person who makes it renounces love. Right? The nymphs mock Alberic because he's short and ugly, and so on. And so he spurns their advances. They're mocking him, but they anyway. He does so renounce love and becomes a powerful ruler because he makes the ring, steals gold, makes the ring, and he becomes the ruler of the dwarf kingdom over the Nibelungs. Okay, there's that. There's also the king of the gods, basically Wotan, and he's building a new palace called Valhalla, and he wants to get it. It's going to be fantastic. It's being built by the giants. In order to get them to do it, he basically offers them as payment his sister. Once the building is complete, he wants to renege on that deal because it wasn't very kind, I suppose. He doesn't want to give his sister. He convinces the giants that there's this powerful ring that Albert has, and that will be a much more interesting, better payment for them. For the deal. So Wotan and Loge, which is the god of fire, some people think Wagner and Bakunin, they go off to the Nibelung kingdom and they capture Alberic and the ring. Great, but Wotan now is reluctant to hand the ring over to the giants because of its power. It's tempting. I guess he's king of the gods. He doesn't get so seduced by power. He knows that it corrupts as well and is a curse. He hands it over to the giants, and they fight over it. But Wotan has then been relieved of the power of the ring. The clouds part, and the palace is revealed, and he calls it Valhalla, and they walk over the rainbow bridge to get there, and that's the end of part one. It's just part one. Right? Part two, the Valkyrie, it's a somewhat incestuous tale that leaves Wotan's daughter Brunhilde asleep on a mountaintop surrounded by fire, And the next part has Siegfried, who forges a sword and battles dragons, Alberic and Wotan, and gets to the mountaintop and awakens Brunhilde with a kiss. You've heard this one before as well, probably Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty or what. Anyway, after a time, or after a few times anyway, they fall in love. And well, this means that Brunhilde must renounce her immortality. She was the daughter of God, right? Anyway, then the last part is the Gottdammerung. Gottdammerung can't be summarized at all. It's the downtime, I suppose, Kali Yuga or something. This quest is story and epic dimensions is well, no, spoiler alert. You find this mythology in other mythologies. You look at the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, there's a similar trajectory, and the journey to the east, many. Anyway, in the end, Alberic reappears, still wanting to get his my precious ring, and the gold is the thing. Well, what is the gold thing? That's Adorno's ultimate question, but we'll get to that. Nietzsche was a fan, a publicist, wrote books in favor of Wagner and promotional work. And then after the move to Beirut, broke with him, effectively stopped seeing him and called him names and so on. He'd been a strong supporter and friend, and in the essays to read are The Case of Wagner and Nietzsche contra Wagner. They're the two keys. There are many other commentaries, but so much can be said there. But I'll stick just for now to how Adorno took up a part of Nietzsche's critique, which was to say it was not with play acting that Nietzsche should have charged Wagner, but rather with denying he was play acting. That's interesting, right? Because for claiming authenticity, he should be critiqued. Postulating his art as genuine, as any singer of emotional songs or a filmmaker making a political film for a fee and selling tickets must know that the thing is staged. And he claimed to be a genuine aesthetic is diabolical for Adorno. It represents or represents is wrong. It performs or it adopts, it becomes the ontology of God. That's why it's diabolical. Well, why is it diabolical for Adorno? It's because basically that affirms that, in turn, the industrial mass production, since only when countless standardized products project for the sake of profit the illusion of being unique, only then does the idea of the truly genuine, is that required? Does it take shape? Right? It's got to be clear. Previously, we assumed no one had to think if an intellectual object or a thing was original or not. The fraud of being genuine is the bourgeoisie basically being blind to the exchange process. That all of these commodities exist. They all claim to be genuine article, the real thing, the label, the brand. Get this one, not all these others. It's not just competition, but that's the exchange process. Genuine things are those to which, so-called genuine, right, are those to which commodities and other means of exchange can be reduced. They can be exchanged, particularly for gold, right? Of course, gold becomes a fetish. It's Marx, classically, but it's also Wagner, the search for the gold. The gold becomes the thing that you're searching for, but that's completely alienated, completely fetished, projecting real social relations or even real interest in objects into the exchange relation and the greed for the shiny gold. And so many stories are that. Okay. Now, Adorno's critique of Wagner is this, but it's also more nuanced, more detailed, and more wider. the point that Donna's making is that the commodification of culture is the achievement of the culture industry, culture as industry, and one of the first major exponents is Wagner and this festival. And Wagner achieves this both by the technique within his music, within the staging of his music and the opera, and also with the staging of the opera inside the festival and the whole festival event. Now, everything at the festival is Wagnerist. It lends itself to promotion. There's Wagner's photograph on beer mugs. There's souvenir shawls from Brunhilde's. There's I don't know what else. There's a whole brochures with Wagner's photograph on the cover. There's special meet and greets with Wagner, and so on. Within the music, though, and this is Adorno's really strong point as well, besides the kind of commodity tie-in, all the paraphernalia that we're familiar with now with film, right? Film has product tie-ins and you have the stars and their autograph or their picture and they're glossy. Within the film, within the opera, it's also the way in which breaking things up into parts and identifying them as standard, according to standards, operates. Wagner introduces this to classical music. How do we explain this? One example might be to think of the Elfenreich, the kingdom of the elves, right? Adorno points out that a standardized element in Wagner is the motif, and this is the beginning of the machinic in music. The piccolo, a little archaic instrument that has a very high-pitched lyrical sound, becomes the motif that introduces the elven kingdom. Once you hear that music, you know you're going in the land of the elves, right? That's a kind of branding. In the same way, the bass drum is the sound of the gods. The bass and maybe the meaty instruments like the deep tones of the cello or something like that. The warriors will be horns and so on. This is the beginning of the path towards complete commodification, and it's already there in the breaking up of the whole into discrete, identifiable, branded parts. So, but anyway, Wagner. What's the most famous piece of Wagner's music? You know, anyone? What piece of Wagner's music do you? No, not the Valkyries. We'll get to. We will talk about it, but I have something else in mind. No. So it's this, and this is kind of a simplification. I'm making a very obvious or crude point in a way to a crude example to make the point in a way to illustrate Adorno's point of commodification. Perhaps it's overplayed, and is Wagner really responsible for this? We don't know, but the commodification of love in the following tune. All right, now I need to turn off my sound for this, I think. All right. that's enough for that. Yeah, you get it. It's the Bridal March from Lohengrin. Wagner basically is the music that everyone consecrates their relationship to. I mean, if you're going to do that kind of thing, put your relationship in the hands of the state, you do it to Wagner's tune, and that consecrates the scene. Probably that's more famous than the Ride of the Valkyries. And of course, famous also is that Wagner is not just involved in the barricades in 1948, but had become some 40 years after his death, 50 years after his death, the house thinker, the favorite musician of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, and this caused all sorts of problems. Of course, his music. Well, Wagner already was a pretty anti-Jewish and a racist, no question about that. What he had to say. I mean, he possibly read Marx on the Jewish question, but where Marx talked about the emancipation of the Jews from their situation in as bankers and so on, Wagner went so far as to call for the emancipation from the Jews, and Hitler enacted it, and that's fair enough that in Israel it'd be banned by the state. Of course, there are Israelis that listen to Wagner. I mean, they've come from Germany. They grew up listening to Wagner. They were still enjoying it. Still, and irrespective of Palestine and what Israel's doing to Palestine, there's the memory of the exceptional horror of the Holocaust and that kind, which continues to affect not just the Hitler connection in the 30s and 40s till Hitler's defeat in 45, but even today. Okay, here an example of Burkhard Kosminski's 2013, I think, anniversary of the 200th anniversary of Wagner. His opera in Dusseldorf was cancelled because he tried to update it and put it into modern dress, so, as others have tried to do. And the modern dress that he chose was Wehrmacht uniforms. People thought that was in bad taste, but this is, in some sense, some of the characterizations of yeah. Anyway, this kind of this was a version of Tannhauser that Kosminski had done. So not even in the ring, but still Wagner. Yeah. Of course, that produced all kinds of debates. Again, the old revival of the pro and con Wagner debate, and that exists everywhere. And some stereotypes about the German as well. A disease called Richard. There's quite of Nietzsche there, but it's also many repetitions of the pro and con Wagner Germans as racist and so on, and then the other side saying, but it's the music that matters, art for art's sake, and so on. Although see the caption underneath the picture of the statue from Berlin here is the Lord of the Ring. Okay, so there's already the connection being made with the Tolkien masterpiece. What is the piece of music we associate most? Besides the one that we don't associate with Wagner, which is the Wedding March. I think people forget that that's Wagner. It's the Valkyries, right? And we should also listen to that. Yes, we also got Adorno with his headphones on. Everyone recognizes that? Yes. I won't play much of it. So, cultural studies, my area of work for the last 15, 20 years. It was agog with Wagner. It remains agog with Wagner, I think. Like Philip Lecoultre writing in 1991, Musica Ficta, through to Zizek several times writing on Wagner. Adorno's 1951 book, In Search of Wagner, of course, is a classic. Alain Badiou, the other, well, the French, the last Maoist in France, according to Badiou, wrote this quite good book, actually, 5 Lessons on Wagner. Zizek introduces Adorno's In Search of Wagner when Verso completely commodifies it, because that's what Verso does. Jean-Jacques Natiez brings out a book in 93 on Wagner's androgyny, sexuality, and so on. It's quite an interesting one. Can we focus on that? Don't. And just recently, Alex Ross brought out Wagnerism. Pretty amazing, big, fat book, 770 pages, 769 pages. Some quite good stuff in there. And these debates are all varied, of course, but one of the things that's striking about, besides Lecoultre, who's pretty dismissive, is the work to reclaim or recuperate, rehabilitate even Wagner. Zizek's project seems to be that, and even Badiou to an extent. And that's very interesting itself. Adorno is not. He's saying the ring basically is the celebration of the renunciation of the revolution. There was no revolution. This is In Search of Wagner. And Wotan is this ghostly image haunting the dead and buried revolution. We know the revolution failed, right, in 1848. And Marx had to go back to the library, and he wrote the Brumaire, and then anticipated another uprising in 57, which didn't come, went back to the library, wrote the Grundrisse, hoped the Civil War in America was something, but it wasn't, worked on capital. So then came the revolution in Paris, the 1871 Commune, and he started to translate after that capital into French, and so. But yeah, Wagner is kind of disappoints Adorno for having his epic basically freeze the and bury the revolution in this going to Valhalla, I suppose. But Adorno's other question comes out more in things like In Search of, in Minima Moralia, and things like that, is more interesting, I think, and it's a bigger question that we can also ask of music and film and our, I suppose, fetish world, right? Maybe we should ask in this seemingly stupid in its simplicity, a simple but stupid question: what's it really about? This search for the ring. This is maybe the question that's never asked. Why is anyone striving for this? Not God, gold, the magic ring, or the chalice of the what's in the Holy Grail, the cup. Or what's this special golden fleece? Why go through all this trouble, struggling through the terrible terrain and battles with Siegfried? Siegfried has to fight Arbelik and Wotan and defeat these monsters and so on in order to get the magic thing and save the world. If not, if anything, this is a kind of story that removes from us the agency, the masses, the agency, because it's magical thinking that the hero will go off and save the world, which smuggles in the proletarianization of everyone else. We're just then the audience that watches and views and where we can go to the genuine article of seeing Beirut, Wagner's presentation, and we buy the commodity tie-in photographs of Wagner and the T-shirt and so on. Because really, rings are useless unless the quest moves everyone towards a state of the socio-political potential where aesthetic expression is enjoyed by all, or fulfillment enjoyed by all. Well, what's it for if not to remove that want, the need from all, and be in the habit of offering to each according to needs? So, we're asking this big silly question, and I suppose there's for Adorno, it's why is this? Why Adorno, or why Wagner? Why it begins with Wagner? The problem of this accepting the administered life, right? It's because for Adorno, it's the tricks of the music in the theatre, of the festival, its event, the beer mugs with Wagner's face in them, and the formulaic nature of the music that deceives us. Gives us the illusion of choice, a bit like Ford automobile comes with the choice of anyone you like, so long as it's any color you like, so long as it's black. And this is not freedom. We wish we had only the chance of freedom in living a life without fear of this magical thinking, being these powerful gods living their lives over us. To be able to see through that is Adorno's challenge to us. To see clearly how the cultural industry, the exchange system, the administered life, to see it for what it is, right? A censorship of desire and dream, and the escapism of no escape. Right? We have the culture hero go on adventures for us, and their desire for the gold, which of course we have a little desire for the gold, but we don't even know what for. Why are we driving so hard to never become billionaires? Because we never will, no matter how many hours you work in wage slavery. And you be quiet, please. My daughter, sorry. So Adorno's making critique of this process of standardization of this exchange system, that everything has to be exchanged into everything else, and that has this effect. Okay, the whole structure of popular music follows this standardization within the songs. Think of popular songs with a chorus, verse, chorus, verse, improvisation, chorus, verse structure, or a chorus consisting of 32 bars, the 12-bar blues. So many different formulas, but all doing the same. And even if the improvisation part is in a different section at the beginning for epic rock, for example, think of Stairway to Heaven, they're all kind of the same, and the listener can substitute the beginning of that epic for another epic, and it creates a pseudo individuality, fake differences. Everything is pretty much the same, and each claims to be completely unique in the same way. Right? That's where spontaneity and creativity are illusory in this society, because it's on a mass scale, and life has been largely replaced by pseudo-individual alienated life, which is a reflection of the social forces in the mode of production of capital, where even research itself becomes merely market research, examining brands and or checking whether people like or dislike things. And the greatness of Facebook is that that's completely automated. We don't even need the researchers now. Everybody's clicking their likes and dislikes and making the algorithm work without human intervention, pretty much. And all this is epiphenomenal to the production process. That's whether you like or dislike. It's going to operate because you're in market segments now, and there'll be something designed for you, and it can't really say anything about genuine desire. Genuine, it's not a thing. So then class differences are subsumed within this structure where everyone is being catered for in some way, and you know, it's not good enough to analyze how specific bits of music operate, or specific parts of the culture industry work, unless you recognize the basic structure of this standardization, that it operates in so many different areas. Now, this Valkyries moment, we can go back to that. I want to go back to that, where I guess Wagner commodifies this piece of music by Wagner itself has become commodified. Right? The example of where that is, I'll suggest, is not just in Francis Ford Coppola's film Apocalypse Now, although that's where people might know it from. In many other Hollywood films, in Charlie Chaplin, he used it. Bugs Bunny cartoons have used it, and I'm not going to show you the clip from. I'll show you a part of the clip, but it may well be cut out by the YouTube copyright selectors. Let me see. There we go. I'll play it up to there, then you'll get to see the helicopters. These are air cavalry force 1, cut to the peaceful village in Vietnam, where everyone wearing non la and Ao Yai and the kids, and this is all going to be interrupted by terror from the sky, but I'm not going to show that. The point is that you know, here's the commodity of the Ride of the Valkyries turned into a product to help sell Francis Ford Coppola's film. Well, except that after the film was out, it was so successful that copies of the Ride of the Valkyries soared. Sales of the Ride of the Valkyries soared after the film. But I want to focus on something else. It's in that sequence which started with the reel-to-reel tape recorder. It's this technology that allows this terror in the air that comes in. You know what's going to happen next in the village. There'll be explosions and death and killing, horror. And it's all just so they can go surfing. It's grotesque. But the reel-to-reel portable music player and the speakers, of course, what makes it possible. Had been a weapon in war long before. Okay, think of chants, drums, war drums, crescendo, people roaring as they run into attack, or the bugle, or something, you know. But it's really with the Vietnam War that an experimental psychological discipline of sonic warfare emerges. And if Even if Wagner wasn't Warner, I've got excellent typo. Even if Wagner wasn't played in Vietnam, he played rock and roll. Certainly, it captures what was going on, and techniques of sonic torture were used in Condal prison, and then went right on up into Guantanamo today. Look at this, the speakers, the camera focuses on the speakers lovingly in a way, although it also focuses on the weapons. He's a soldier with his hand. Alex Ross makes a good point about the irony of the black American soldiers looking at each other that interrupts the focus on the cutting of the music to the pictures of the speakers on the gunships. And that black Americans are traveling with a white American gang using a racist musician's music to terrorize a non-white village and destroy it so they can go surfing. Whether Francis Ford Coppola had thought through all those ironies, that was the subtext that was intentional or not, up for grabs. But yeah, it's pretty grotesque. As I said, Ride of the Valkyries isn't only used in this film, but this was super successful, and it's horrible, and it's true horror. I think comes out in the film Jarhead, where there's a sequence where in Iraq the soldiers are watching for entertainment, Apocalypse Now, and they start cheering like crazy when this sequence music. They love it. This sequence of music. And it's horrific. Of course, psychological warfare using music, sonic warfare basically becomes a big thing, part of the international arms industry. And Air Force armies all over the world, military all over the world buys this stuff at arms fairs. Americans used it in Grenada in 1983, in Iraq in 1991, in Fallujah in 2004, and Guantanamo, and you name it. But okay, the reason for talking about this another thing to talk about here in relation to this film is how in this war film and other films like this, Vietnam becomes a kind of weird commodity too, a fetish object, because it's not the Vietnam that we might know from looking out the window today or living in Vietnam today. It's Vietnam as the product of America's attempt to use, in Hollywood at least, to rewrite what happened in the war as Rambo winning, basically, or Full Metal Jacket by Stanley Kubrick, Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola, and other films, Deer Hunter, and so many others, kind of keep a version of Vietnam in the public eye, right up to just the present. For example, Spike Lee's just recent 2,000 years ago to 2019, The Five Bloods, 2019, 2020, started 2020, Five Bloods, where there's almost like a loving hat tip to Apocalypse Now, and they are, again, well, you'd be just surprised how stereotyped this film is. Vietnam is war Vietnam, and the whole environment is that version that tourists visit, and maybe, but at least even real Vietnam impinges a bit on them. The five heroes are in a quest to find the gold, basically, and all the Vietnamese are nameless except for one, Hanoi Jane. Not Hanoi Jane, sorry, we had that last week, didn't we? Saigon Sally, I can't remember her name. Veronica, Rebecca. Anyway, yeah, and the reparations, it's a film about reparations, right? Black Lives Matter, but they go to the soldiers, not to any Vietnamese. So the quest for the ring, the Fellowship of the Heroes is all about the Americans again. We can watch the trailer and you'll just see how, in particular, it's quite twisted. Try and watch the trailer.
Black GI. Is it fair to serve more than the white Americans that sent you here? Nothing is more confused than to be ordered into a war to die without the faintest idea of what's going on. I dedicate this next record to the soul brothers of the 1st Infantry Divisions. Be safe.
Gentlemen, welcome back to Vietnam.
Every man in all his glory.
Who was that guy?
That brother was the best damn soldier that ever lived. We bury it. Later on, we come back and collect.
I shall resign the presidency.
Being back here, it is not easy. Broken man. So are you blaming yourself? You don't even know. No! We've been dying for this country from the very get. We give this call to our people.
In my line of work, I have to be very careful. And that means knowing exactly who I am in business with.
So the thing ends with a peace symbol, and yeah, the reparations, as I say, don't go to anyone in Vietnam. They go to Black Lives Matter, which is, again, another great filmmaker who is taught by film students. But the consequence is that people only see a very weird version of Vietnam if they don't come on the tourist version of Vietnam, which is beaches and banh mi. They really haven't that many options except for this Rambo-ized, Apocalypse Now psychedelicized version, and that's really weird. Going back to what we looked at last week with Jean-Luc Godard, you can see the same kind of thing. His treatment of Vietnam in the film La Chinoise, where the Vietnamese person is wearing Nun La, and well, she's not Vietnamese, she's meant to stand for the Vietnamese, but he's standing behind a barricade of little red books, Mao, Vietnam, confused, with a radio that turns into a machine gun. And they're making a political point about the difference between the dangerous communists and the co-opted communists, the Soviet Union. And Johnson is making deals in Poland to build factories while bombing factories in Hanoi, which is a fair enough point. And yes, there were many supporters in Paris of Vietnam, and the talks were in Paris. But Vietnam gets fixed into this capsule of representation that so many people then see because it's in a famous film, and not much else comes afterwards. Anyway, we'll talk about that after the break. So a 5-minute break from now. And you can fill in the questions and we'll discuss that and talk about the selfie exercise in the just after taking a break for a coffee. Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, I'll stop the recording now.